Oh God! It's a bee! It's a bee!
Face to face, hand to hand, film to film.
Welcome to Phenomena, the film to film podcast. We're doing Phenomena today. Some truly great acting there in this film. Okay, Iñaki, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well, James. How about you?
Not bad, not bad. Yeah, this movie is quite a film. So let's get right into it. So synopsis: a young girl with an amazing ability.
Wait, what film are we talking about?
We are talking about Phenomena, Dario Argento's Phenomena from 1985.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, a young girl with an amazing ability to communicate with insects is transferred to an exclusive Swiss boarding school where her unusual capability might help solve a string of murders. Good?
Yeah. I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
What do you
No,
think? What do you think?
I think that sums it up pretty well. I mean, it's a fairly simple premise, especially when you put it like that. But there is a lot of flavor added by Mr. Dario Argento. All right. Okay. So this film was his follow-up to Tenebrae, done 3 years later, 1985. It comes off, one of my favorite stretches of a filmmaker, starting with Deep Red, then Suspiria, then Inferno in 1980, and then Tenebrae. I love all four of those films, and then this film follows it up. What did you think of Phenomena?
I actually really liked it.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I think it was fun. The main character had quite a bit of agency for this genre.
Mm-hmm.
And it borrowed a lot from other films, including American films, I think.
Yeah. Some people have compared this as sort of like the greatest hits of Dario Argento. It takes a lot of elements from himself, but I think you're right. It does take elements from American films too. The setting is also very unique. I mean, each Argento film I feel like has a very unique setting that's worth talking about. This one in sort of the Swiss Alps, and I know you've spent some time in Switzerland, so we'll get to that a bit later. So for me, this is not my favorite. I don't put this in the same category as like those previous four films that came before it. But this film does leave me with a smile on my face after a truly batshit insane last 20 to 25 minutes. That's worth saying. This film, I have a really hard time judging it because it has some moments that are really a ton of fun and other moments that are pretty questionable, let's say. Some very questionable use of music and some questionable acting, and that's probably putting it very kindly. For this film. So I have very mixed feelings. This is my second time viewing this film, and the first time I was like, well, that was something, and this time knowing a bit more what to expect, I think I enjoyed it a little bit more just because I was able to, I knew what was coming, and I knew I was going to really enjoy that last 20 to 25 minutes. Okay, well, let's get into the film. So Phenomena. It was one of Dario Argento's, I think, last films to really get a proper U.S. release, but it's 110 minutes, which I think is one of the longer Argento films we've talked about, or longer Italian genre films in general. But the U.S. version, which was called Creepers, was cut all the way down to 84 minutes.
Wow.
So I am kind of curious about that version, just because that is a ton of movie to cut from it, and so I wonder how what they did cut from it. Anyways, so that's just a little bit of background on this. So let's get right into sort of the look and feel of the film. I feel like that's something that we always talk about when we come to Argento. This film set in the Alps, Switzerland, and he shoots it in a very naturalistic way compared to something like Suspiria. or Inferno. What was your feeling on sort of the cinematography and the setting?
Yeah, this was way definitely more on falling within the realism. Film the film style is more within the realism aspect, if you will. It naturalistic, I think was the word you used, and I agree. I think you got to see a lot of the location. It wasn't a very set heavy film. This was more of a, seeing and experiencing the Alps, seeing the waterfalls, things like that. I mean, you did have your sets, but the sets were not.
Yeah, except for maybe the last set. But yeah, it's not like Suspiria where you spend like pretty much the whole movie in the dance academy.
Exactly, but also like beyond that, it's like the sets are not even the highlight, if you will, perhaps except for the ending, because in all the other movies the sets are almost a character on itself. Very bright, lots of different details. This one, the sets were more toned down, but you got to enjoy the location, the beauty of the area, and I think this is more of a more of a plot heavy film for Argento. I guess that goes beyond the feel. But I mean, you still got your Argento touches, some explorations of the houses, things like that, like some fun camera movements that one enjoys from Argento films.
Yeah, for sure, definitely a lot of characteristic Argento. He's always moving the camera and stuff like that. But yeah, it is. I'd say probably the first 80 minutes of this film are just more. Yeah, as we've both been putting, just very naturalistic and stuff. Let me ask you, have you spent time in sort of this area? I know you spent quite a summer or something like that in Switzerland. Were you out in the Alps at all?
I mean, the Alps have a huge presence in Switzerland overall. So, I mean, I think this film is set. Do you remember the name of the town?
No, it could have very well been a fictional town too. But let me see if I can pull it up right here. I don't know. Richard Wagner School of Academy for Girls.
Well, that part is probably not a real place.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know.
In short, I mean, obviously I haven't been everywhere in Switzerland. I've been in Zurich. I've driven from Zurich to Geneva, and I've also been at the Rhine Falls. But generally speaking, Switzerland is. I mean, the Alps are like right there, because it's a really tiny country. So the Alps are just. You can see them from everywhere you are. Everywhere you are, you can see the Alps. I mean, actually, when I was watching this film, at first I thought the fall maybe was filmed at the Rhine Falls, which are on the northern side by Zurich. But then I read somewhere, and I kind of closed it, so I forgot where it was. That I think it's located more closer to Bern, which is more in the central area. But I mean, either way, it's you got lots of green yet somewhat. Yeah, you got green. It's a cooler area of Europe, if you will, but it's not like northern Europe, or it's not, and also it's not warm like southern Europe. It sort of has like a cool yet somewhat Mediterranean type of weather.
Interesting.
Or I mean, yeah, it's not necessarily coastal.
Yeah, I mean it's a cool setting, and if I remember correctly, when they do go to the city briefly, I think that's Zurich. And you can correct me if I'm wrong there, but I like a lot of the shots out in like just sort of the rural setting where you have like these huge green spaces. There's like a lot of negative space, and you just see like Jennifer Connelly or someone like that just wandering around, and it sort of creates this like vastness of feel. And I do feel like that's a little different from most of Argento's films, which tend to be in more urban settings.
Right.
And so this, in that sense, maybe this does feel a little bit influenced by more American films. Anyways, you're saying that you noticed some influence from other films here. What films come to mind as far as that goes?
So this is plot-wise, perhaps. I know this movie came out after Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
And even though Friday the 13th was sort of a cheap copy of Halloween, it did set a plot point that this film, I feel like, kind of followed and explored. And that's the mother with a deformed and perhaps dead child. And I mean, the very ending to me was like extremely similar. You have this deformed child in the middle of the lake, which is probably, I don't know if it's supposed to be Lake Geneva or Lake Lemont, depending on who names it. But she's in the lake, kind of fighting this child. Of course, you have more bombastic fires and really cool under the water scenes, but you still have a little bit of that. And that easily could be Jason. And then the mother decapitates someone. Which could easily be Mrs. Voorhees. I mean, I'm not saying that.
Interesting. No. I mean, that's good. Yeah, it's like dialed up to 15 in this movie. But yeah, with like lots of those Argento characteristics. The other one I was thinking of that I thought you were going to bring up was Carrie. Due to sort of like that that sort of telepathic instinct with the bugs and stuff like that, which is different from the actual movie Carrie, but kind of brings together interesting sort of similar psychic abilities, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, I think it's easy to see sort of a mishmash. I think more than other Argento films, which tend to have more of like a consistent theme. And I think that kind of contributes to the unevenness of this film. Just the fact that it does feel like he's tossing everything against the wall. And I think that there's a lot to like there, but there's also, I don't know. Yeah. You look like you were going to say something.
I agree with you. Especially one of the things that I wrote as a note when it happened, and I thought the theme was going to continue, and it never did, was the use of narration. When she arrives at the Wagner School, or whatever it's called, the narrator from Suspiria actually narrates that entrance, which again happened in Suspiria as well, and I expected, oh, okay, we're going to have a little bit of that theme. And that was the only time it happened. So it's almost like, it felt like Argento was like, I really like that scene in Suspiria, where she arrives at the school. Let's do the same thing here.
Yeah. And the school, I mean, maybe that's one of the interesting things with this film, too, is like it really toys with your expectations in some ways, because like when I originally saw this film, my mind immediately went to Suspiria 2 because they have that car ride there. The car ride's a lot less intense than the Suspiria car ride, but they'd have a car ride to the school with some truly terrible acting from Dario Argento trying to kill a bee. And you expect the school to play more of a part, but really the school is in it so much less than Suspiria. So I don't know. It's kind of interesting. I don't mind the school. I think it's kind of a neat set, but it's certainly not Suspiria level of stylish.
No, and I mean I don't mind that it's not, because I mean it would have been distracting. But which is why it was sort of weird to sort of have that introduction that is similar to the Suspiria school, even though it's not. Right.
Yeah. And this film also sort of takes up an interesting place in Argento or Giallo fans thing. It's kind of divided whether people consider this a Giallo film or not. I think you can see the elements that are. Giallo tends to not be supernatural too. We don't need to discuss whether we think this is Giallo or not. I think that's more for people that are into the semantics. But there are arguments over whether this film should be officially considered giallo, but it kind of is to some extent. Suspiria meets giallo, in my view at least. So you can see what elements are kind of giallo. We feel like the stalker or killer part of it, black gloves at certain scenes, but it's also more supernatural in a way. So
have you seen the Friday the 13th, I think, part 4? Whichever is the one before he goes to New York. I want to say it might be part 5 or 6. I don't know, there's so many.
Part 8 is New York, so part 7. I don't think I've seen part 7. I've seen part 6, though.
Okay, so I believe it's part 7. Jason faces a girl who also has telekinetic powers.
Oh, yeah. That's I've heard about that one. That's like Jason versus Carrie is like the unofficial title of that.
Right. And I mean, this kind of had a little bit of that, you could say.
Yeah. No, in a way. You could. I don't know. This film at the end, it just throws so much against the wall at you that it's just like one thing after the other. We'll definitely get to that ending, which in my view is definitely probably the number one reason to watch this film. Okay. Well, any thoughts on some of the cast members? Like Jennifer Connelly plays the lead here. I think it's pretty clear he had seen her in Sergio Leone, who's kind of his mentor. His previous film, Once Upon a Time in the America. Obviously, she's kind of gone on to have a very nice career here in Hollywood as well. How did you find her performance in here? She's obviously very young.
I think she's good. I think she did a good job. I'm assuming she dubbed over herself, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. And the dubbing always, not always works well. Mm-hmm. But overall, I think she did a good job for what she was doing. I mean, she's playing a character that has the movie frames it as double personality. I don't know if I would frame it as that, but she does have sort of like the bratty teenage girl side, and then this more stoic I speak with the animal side. Mm-hmm. And she was good at switching from one to the other.
Yeah. I find some of the dialogue writing for her to be, or in general in this film, to just be not good. And part of that is the dubbing and stuff like that. So I think that definitely kind of helps to detract from her. So I don't really blame her for that. But I find her to be fairly serviceable. I thought she had decent chemistry with Donald Pleasance. I think gives a pretty decent performance with what I think is pretty crummy written material from Argento here. I like Donald Pleasance. How did you find Mr. Pleasance or Mr. Loomis in this film?
Yeah, I was gonna call him Loomis. I have it on my notes. It's all over. It just says Loomis.
Yeah.
I think he did a good job. He was very well cast for the scene. Even the lines that were more ridiculous that he had to say, he says. The way, I mean, that's the part where, I agree with you. Jennifer Connelly could not pull off some of those lines, but that's because the writing was crap.
The writing is pretty awful in this film. Like, I think
exactly
particularly awful even for an Argento film.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know how young Jennifer Connelly was in this film.
I think 13 or 14. So she was actually truly young. Yeah.
So I mean, for someone at that age, I think that was as good as you can do with the script you have. But I mean, that's when you can see this is a girl basically doing a portrayal with bad writing, and then you have a seasoned actor doing a portrayal with bad writing, and the seasoned actor can pull that shit off.
Yeah.
You can have bad writing and he can read it, and you're like, oh, his little rant about the wind in this town sound really ominous and interesting because, the man can pull it off.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point. And I think Donald Pleasance is particularly well suited to saying, like, just not good writing. I mean, like, he can make that stuff sound, like, pretty good overall. And I think he pulls that off more than other people. The third performance in the film, I don't have very kind things to say about, but I imitated her trying to kill the bee at the beginning, Daria Nicolodi. I think I like her in general. I think she's good in a lot of films, like Deep Red. I don't think she's good in this film. I think some of her acting is pretty bad. A lot of that falls, again, onto the writing and the dubbing, which is not great. But I think of the three leads, I think she's probably the weakest in my view.
Yeah, I agree. She probably was the weakest, and she had the... And her character was one of the more important characters. And to have a good actor on that would have been much better.
Yeah. The scene where she has to kill the bee, I don't know how you reacted to that, but I just started laughing out loud at how ridiculous it was. It's like the car stops. It's like she's like batting wildly at a bee. It was pretty funny. I mean, don't put her in the set of Candyman, that's for sure.
Also, I was gonna say though, I didn't even know it was a bee until like for the longest time I thought it was a fly, and then I was like, oh, it's a really dark bumblebee.
Yeah.
You know, I have a friend who crashed her car because she had a spider on her shoulder.
Wow.
I mean, I think she was like parking or something.
Mm-hmm.
Noticed the spider, freaked out, dropped everything, and crashed the car. I mean, not a hard crash, but like hit, the next car or whatever. So I mean, like, I can see people freaking out about an insect or a bug. There are people with phobias, but I mean, still, I agree with you. The lady did her best to not seem reasonable.
Yeah. So I mean, if you're trying to like have some bad acting to make Jennifer Connelly's acting look good or especially good, they accomplished that in the scene. The fact that it almost crashed the car too was pretty humorous to me. When there's like a separate driver, it's not like Dario Argento is even driving the car.
Well, the separate driver was also sort of freaking out about the bee.
Yeah, but I mean, he probably was freaking out because he had like a woman in the back going, "Oh my god, a bee, a bee, a bee!"
Hey, it can happen. The thing I thought was kind of interesting about her and her acting, or her character as well, was also that it wasn't really clear what she was going for. Again, I'm not sure if to blame her, Nicolodi, or to blame Argento on that. But there were moments where, I mean, what was she? Actually, I was very curious. What was she? Was she working for the school? Was she working for Jennifer's dad? What was she doing? What was her role there? I wasn't sure about that. Maybe I missed it.
I assume she was some sort of a teacher, I guess.
Right, but then why did she take Jennifer to her house, or what? Because it sounds like she had talked to her father's assistant, because she knew that she was at the bank and all that stuff. So why was she doing all of that, which was outside the school? I don't know. I mean, I didn't know that, and then the way that she was characterized did not help, right? Because like when she's coming in, it seems like she picks up Jennifer, and it seems like she's more of a
administrator or something.
Administrator, yeah, a school administrator. But then later, she seems like a very a weak person, a very timid person who doesn't have much agency within the school. So it's like, okay,
right,
maybe she's a teacher, and then she goes. She seems like an assistant, perhaps because she's doing something outside the school. And then she goes batshit crazy.
Yeah.
And that's the only time when you're like, okay, well, this I understand.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think there's just a lot of unevenness in her performance and like what she's asked to do too. It's like one moment she's supposed to be able to comfort Jennifer Connelly to the point where Jennifer is going to go to her home and stay there for a bit, and then the next moment she's going batshit. And a lot of that I think is the writing, but it feels very awkward, to put it, I guess, bluntly. And I don't know that it was my favorite. And I'm inclined to blame a lot of this on the writer and director, Argento, because we've seen Nickelodeon in other roles, and she's not bad. I mean, she's can be good, and Deep Red, I think she's legitimately good and has good chemistry with David Hemmings. But this film, I think she's all over the place, and it doesn't entirely work. Okay, so moving on to another thing that has very mixed results, and I think we can talk about a fair amount. The use of music in this film. Thoughts? I'm giving you first.
There are moments where I really liked it, and there are moments where I didn't. So let's start with the use of metal, and I believe the band was it Guns N' Roses? No, it was a popular band. I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, there's Iron Maiden was used at some point. There's a couple other. Let me see if I can pull it up. Iron Maiden was probably the biggest one used though.
Yeah. So yeah, there was Iron Maiden. On other.
Motorhead is the other big one.
Motorhead. Okay. So, actually, I was not minding it at first. Like, I think there was a scene where she's dreaming, and she's dreaming what's happening. And, you got the guitars, you got that stuff, you got the drums, and I was like, you know what? This is working. Until you get the singing. And and then you're like, no. This is not working anymore. This is... You just put a very cool song. I actually really like the song.
Yeah.
But it's no longer mood. It takes you out of the movie. It's like, oh, this is a cool song. This is a cool scene.
Yeah. Not to mention, I don't even think that's the most inappropriate use of it. I think a good example of just the total unevenness of this film is like we get this great. We'll talk about this later. This great death scene with Donald Pleasance that I think is effectively staged and rendered, and then it goes to his funeral, and all of a sudden it's just fucking Motorhead going off, and it's like, what the hell is happening? And I think he even put lyrics in that one too, and it's just like,
yep.
Why? It's like I think this is the point where I'm like, Dario Argento is just a little too much in his head, and someone needs to be a no man to him and tell him to when stuff just doesn't work. Because like I thought that was like completely terrible use of music in the film, just ruining what should have been was a very good performance by Donald Pleasance that probably Argento didn't deserve, and it kind of ruined like what should have been like a more tender, somber, melancholy moment.
Yeah, no, I agree. That was the other note I had. The funeral. I mean, it's not a funeral. It's really when they're taking away his body. But still, it should have been.
It's totally very inappropriate.
I mean, you could have even had metal, but a somber metal. Like there's such thing as somber metal. So if you wanted to be like, you know what, fuck it, I want to have metal in my movie. I want to have like hard metal. That's cool. You got some somber metal that you could have used here instead of singing about. I forget what they were singing about. It reminded me of. Have you seen the latest or that Cruella de Vil film by Disney, the one that came out recently?
I have not. I heard it. They had quite a soundtrack now.
Yeah, but it was completely. I mean, let's put it this way: they picked really good songs. Mm-hmm. They put it on their iPhone. They put it on shuffle. They pressed play, and then that's what the movie had. Some random, really good songs playing at at moments that were completely unnecessary and super distracting. So it's like, oh, this should be sad, but it's playing, I don't know, some song by Nicki Minaj. That's not the case, but you know what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like Argento. I mean, the songs that he misuses too are also like very popular songs, especially for the time. So I'd imagine he spent a fair amount of money on them. The song that played during Pleasance's funeral, or no, Body Taken Away, I guess. Locomotive by Motorhead and Flash of the Blade by Iron Maiden was played at the moment you talked earlier. Yeah, and I think you described that earlier moment well too. I pretty much agree. Where it's like, oh, this is kind of weird, but it's sort of working. To what the fuck is happening, and why are there lyrics now over this, and this makes no sense. And like this like 14-year-old girl at like this German academy or Swiss academy for learning or something like that, and she's like hanging out the window and having a psychic moment. It just didn't work at all, in my view, at a certain point. So but at other moments, I think the more subtly used music, especially during the conclusion, I thought worked pretty well.
Yeah, and actually there were some good songs from Goblin.
Yep.
I mean, there are moments where I recognize Goblin, and actually the music worked out really well.
Yeah, and they're credited as the people that did the soundtrack for this. So other than those like a handful of big songs, I think it's mostly Goblin's work. Yeah. Okay. Any other soundtrack thoughts or?
No, I think. Yeah, no. I think that was
Okay. So obviously you haven't seen the 84-minute version of this, and we've both seen just the 110-minute version of this. What do you think of the length? Do you think this movie is the right length? Do you think it should be shorter? Do you think like the 84-minute version would be better? Yeah, just kind of an open-ended question. I'm trying to develop my own feelings on this, and to be honest, I really don't know.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what you could have cut off. I mean, there are moments where the movie gets slow.
Yeah.
But could you cut those scenes off? I don't know. I mean, I think sometimes the film felt slow because of the quality of writing, the quality of the dialogue, but there were some things within that dialogue that was kind of necessary for understanding the plot. So if you cut it off completely, I feel like it might make the movie convoluted. I mean, this is kind of a complicated movie. You got tons of moving pieces. For actually, when I was watching it, I thought I had spoiled the movie, or something had spoiled the movie for me, because I said before I looked up the location, so I looked at the article and I read something. I read something about Monkey Shine, which is that movie by Romero.
Yeah. Which
and then
that's after this, I believe they released.
Yeah, it is
Anyways,
after.
Sorry, go ahead.
But I read that, and then the entire time I thought, oh shit, the monkey's the killer.
Not quite.
Not quite. Right, but that I felt like, oh man, this movie's been spoiled for me. The monkey's the killer.
Yeah.
Which is pretty funny, actually, if it was.
Yeah, this would be a very weird double bill with Monkey Shines. Like, I wonder if there's like a moment in the 80s where they're like, oh yeah, we got to put a chimp in this. It's just really strange. Anyways.
I know. But what was I going with this? Oh yeah, but like there. I mean, but it was plausible for the monkey to be a killer. I mean, it's not.
No,
it could be because
it even hints at it. I mean, like that's probably the biggest red herring we get is like the monkey seems to wield weapons at certain times, and he's there when like Pleasance gets killed and stuff like that.
Right. I mean, well, but when Pleasant gets killed, that's when you realize the monkey's not the killer, because the monkey wants to kill whoever killed Pleasant.
Unless the monkey is an unreliable narrator.
It is possible.
I mean, it's a fucking Dario Argento film. Anything can happen.
Right. Yeah. Right. I mean, it's funny because I do have in my notes. It's like Loomis is killed. Monkey goes ape shit. But where I'm going with this is there are so many pieces that like I feel like if you cut something, it could get really confusing.
Yeah, and that's kind of the reputation Creepers has. The Creepers cut, the shortcut too, is that like the fans of Argento at least, tend to prefer the longer one because the shorter one just didn't make any sense. And I tend to agree. I think I agree with just about everything you said, that the issue isn't the length in itself, but the fact that like some of the writing slows it down a lot, and it's hard to cut anything and keep this film still coherent. I'm sure you could cut snips and things a couple minutes off of it, just like at the edges of scenes, but for a coherent film that makes sense, I think you kind of need all of the basic plot details in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Before we move on to scenes, wanted to ask you if you'd seen *Malignant*. This is supposedly a big inspiration on that film.
*Malignant*.
The new James Wan film that came out a couple months ago.
Oh, I know. I was supposed to, and then I missed out.
Okay. Anyways, that film, emotionally speaking, that film, and how I felt about the film, it ends up feeling very similar to this. Where for like the first 2/3 of it, I'm like, okay, this isn't bad, but this isn't particularly good either. And then the last bit of it just leaves me with a big smile on my face, and I just really enjoyed it. So I don't want to spoil more of that too, especially if you haven't seen it. Anything else to add before we kind of move on to set pieces?
I mean, I agree with you with the two. Actually, I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
When do you think the movie turned that corner? From, oh, okay, this is kind of your run-of-the-mill giallo with a little bit of supernatural stuff, because you already know pretty much in the get-go that the girl has some powers. From that to, oh, this is crazy. Like, what was it? What was the turn of the corner for you?
I think the moment the son turns his head and he just has like that crazy ass makeup and he starts attacking her and stuff like that, then I'm like, okay, I don't know what the fuck happened in the first hour and a half of this film at all, but this film is just going totally batshit, balls to the wall. Or maybe no, or it could no, it's the moment where she falls into that giant tub of just disgusting maggots and stuff like that. That's the moment where I was like, all right, I'm back into this film.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, I think when the film started losing me, you had the moment where Loomis died, and the monkey went ape shit and was hanging on the car of the killer as the killer's driving off, and the monkey's just trying to stab through the car, and I'm like, okay, all right, this is not your run-of-the-mill giallo.
So you like that moment?
I did. I thought. I mean, I was like, first of all, props to the folks training the monkey or the ape. Props to them. Props to, I don't know, like having an ape wielding a scalpel is a very interesting and dangerous thing.
Well, as we know, these Italians didn't always take the proper precautions on this. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah, I know.
But yeah, no, I love everything with the chimp. I mean, honestly, it's like, if you're willing to include the chimp as a performer, he might be my favorite. Him and Pleasance are pretty much like my two, number one and number two, that are very just fun to watch every time they're on screen. Yeah,
and they had an amazing chemistry though.
They did.
Too.
I would watch that buddy cop movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the moment where you're sort of like into the film again.
Yeah, and then he went into your complaint with the having metal on the metal music on the sort of funeral or somber moment.
Yeah.
And then it picked up again around the time you said, when she falls in that pit of rotting flesh.
Yeah. It's a great moment. Okay. Okay, so let's start going through some of the set pieces. We don't need to talk about this, all of these at least. So there's the opening where we sort of have this Danish girl, sort of sets the setting for us. There's like the cool yellow bows. I'm always a fan of like Argento's visual styles and the colors he puts things. She not a good actor, but we do get to see her head chopped off eventually when she wanders into the house and sort of goes over to that waterfall area. Okay, I'm gonna keep moving unless you want to talk about that one. There's
Let's talk about whichever you want to talk about now.
Okay. Well, I especially want to talk about the ending, but I do feel like maybe we should talk about one or two of these others. There's the girl that gets stabbed at the beginning where Connolly has like her psychic moment where she sort of hangs from the balcony, falls, gets picked up, and then eventually runs into Donald Pleasance, which is a very convoluted way for her to meet Donald Pleasance. There's the roommate that gets killed, where she's walking around, again, kind of similar to the last one. She ends up finding the glove of the killer. And then, okay, maybe this one. This one I think stands out as just being a little different, where she is bullied. This isn't actually a death scene, but I thought it was kind of interesting and cool, where she's being bullied and like all the girls are mocking her and stuff like that. I do think it does a reasonable job, at least, with sort of like the bullying scenes and stuff like that, and making her seem like an outsider. I thought that was reasonably effective, as far as like some of the dramatic stuff goes. And then it gets the moment where like her hair starts to like wind starts to brush against it. We hear sort of the sound effects, which I think are great, and insects just start to overwhelm the house. That's probably like a moment that's maybe sort of similar to Carrie. In a way, but yeah, I thought that one was pretty well handled. Any thoughts on that scene? All the insects.
No, I thought that was one of the more. It was a very. It was probably one of the better directed scenes. I mean, directed. I'm talking about with both on the painting the picture, and also with the characters and use of characters. Because you do have the girl being swarmed by the bullies. Police, it says there. By the bullies. And then there is this like buzzing sound, almost like she's being swarmed by bugs. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of what makes her call the flies. Mm-hmm. And I think it works really well, sort of doing those two parallels.
Right, and we also know Argento's a crazy person, so he probably used real bugs for those scenes somehow.
Yeah.
They certainly look real. In fact, I mean, this might be a good opportunity to talk about that too. One of the things I do like about this film is all of the close-up visuals and views we get of insects and stuff like that. I think Argento's sort of fascination with that stuff sort of carries over pretty well, and like. I don't know. I mean, like I'm reminded a bit of like Deep Red, where we get these like really detailed close-ups of miniatures and stuff like that. I like that in this film. I thought that was kind of neat, and you don't really see that in a ton of this stuff side of the I don't know, like Nature Channel or something like that.
True.
Yeah.
True. I mean, I think that's one of the nice things about this film. It sort of explored the more natural aspect of its location.
Yeah. I mean, you can sort of see that like Argento had it in his head as a premise of the film, like a girl with sort of like these telepathic abilities with insects, and then sort of built everything around there. And some of it works and some of it doesn't. And I think that might be why it sort of feels like a greatest hits, is he's trying to build these different pieces that he's already had in films, or is inspired by like stuff like Friday the 13th or Carrie, and bring them and pull them into sort of like this core storyline that he has. Next up, I had where she explores the house. There's like some weird dolls and stuff like that. So this is the house that we see at the beginning where the Danish girl gets killed. And then I had Donald Pleasance getting stabbed. Maybe we'll talk about that one just because you were bringing up the part with the chimp, which is like, I think the scene is just very, as I said earlier, I just think it sums up the film perfectly. With its perfections and imperfections, where you have like this wonderful scene where Donald Pleasance gets attacked with like his elevator thing. Up until that point, we are thinking that Jennifer is more in danger rather than Loomis, as you put it. And so then we sort of have like him in this area, and the chimp gets locked out, and then he starts to come down to help the chimp out, and then his elevator thing gets paused, and he gets stabbed with that really interesting weapon, almost a medieval weapon.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have, which I had forgotten, so I'm glad you brought it up, the scene where the chimp attacks the car, which is pretty well handled. I mean, I thought that scene was quite effective for what it was. And it's like, go chimp. And then we get a downer where we get that super inappropriate music by Motorhead playing. So, yeah. Any thoughts on this beyond what we covered already?
No, I mean, I thought it was a creative way of killing someone. Because it's almost like instead of the killer stabbing him through his own thrust, is Pleasant stuck in his wheelchair elevators or lift or whatever it's called, and get a stab while moving downwards. It's effective. It also showed it did a good job, I feel like, emotionally speaking, on the pain that it caused the monkey. 'Cause the monkey can again, props for this fucking monkey, because is freaking out because he cannot save his friend or patient. And then once Pleasant is dead, goes through all the phases of grief.
Yeah, and immediately goes into revenge. And pretty much the rest of the plot, we see them. We see one shot of them just like wandering around and finding a knife, and then just wandering off, which is another great shot. And it's just like, what is this movie? This movie is so strange.
I mean, I would love to see a remake of this film, but the main character be the ape.
That film would probably there's like an 80% chance that film would be completely awful, and a 20% chance that it'd be like the best thing of the year.
I know. I like those odds.
Yeah, I take those odds. Okay, well, the last thing I wanted to talk about, which I think we can spend a fair bit of time on, is the conclusion, which is just one thing after the other events happening. Starts off with her sort of getting locked in the house by Daria Nicolodi, who we now know is the villain. What's her name again? Frau Buckner. Yes. So she's locked in the house, and an officer comes. Music starts to play, and she's locked up. She wakes up. We just sort of hear the officer screaming in the background, which I thought is a great touch. And she sort of escapes through the top above a doorway, through sort of the glass there, initially trying to pull the phone out, and eventually the phone falls through the floorboards, and so she has to climb her way out, and then she ends up falling into the floorboards, which is sort of like this like underground subterranean area where she needs to climb. Tries to call. Eventually the inspector grabs her from behind, and so it's kind of this scary moment where this arm just sort of comes out and grabs her, and she ends up falling into the pool, which is like an extremely gnarly pool. You know what? Let's just pause. We'll talk about it up to this point, because it is just one thing after the other. I'm like not even halfway through, and a ton of stuff has happened. What do you think? Yeah, go ahead.
I think the setup on how she gets there is also sort of relevant. So at first, this is supposed to be a safe place, and once it's not, and she locks the house. Already from that start, the house locking mechanism was something I was not expecting from an 80s movie in Italy. We're talking about like some hard steel doors just shutting down many areas of the house. So that already sort of sets the stage for, this is different. This is like almost like the trap from the Halloween, the second to latest Halloween film, right? Like, there's like gizmos that are only like extremely crazy people have.
Yeah, no normal people don't have doors like that.
Exactly. And then after that, it's her trying to get away. I think it does a really good job through that, when she's going through a tunnel trying to do whatever the fuck she was trying to do with the phone. To be honest, I wasn't sure.
I assume she was trying to call the police.
Right. even though the cop was already trapped by her. But still, like that was also like very like claustrophobic, and then ending with all of that with her falling into a pool of rotting flesh. It's just the cherry on top on just climbing the level of, I don't know if even suspense, but it's a level of oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. Like it's just
yeah. And I mean, I think that whole sequence is. I mean, I agree with you. I think it is very suspenseful. And it's you're not going to turn away from the screen during the last 25 minutes. That's for sure. Yeah. I also like how it's sort of cross cut with Shapiro sort of coming to get her finally. And so he's sort of framed as if he's going to be like the savior and stuff like that. And that pool is nasty, man. That is like one of the nastiest pools I've seen. This is like where Dario spent his whole practical effects budget, is like this whole last 25 minutes.
I mean, if those were live maggots, I probably would have thrown up.
Oh, God. I mean, I almost... Yeah, that's like one of the nastiest scenes. I mean, that holds up super well, I think, today. I mean, it's 36 years later, and that scene is still super nasty.
Yeah, I props to Jennifer Connelly. I mean, again, if those were real maggots, props to Jennifer Connelly on like not throwing up in the scene.
Or she might have. I mean, what do we know? I mean, it also like lingers there. She has like a really hard time getting out of that tub too, which is kind of amusing. And then eventually, this is the part where I actually do like Daria Nicolodi's performance. Frau Buckner finally comes in, and she just starts laughing at them maniacally. And it's super campy and super B-movie, but I kind of enjoyed it, to be honest. And you're like, okay, finally, this character starts to make more sense. Yeah. So eventually the detective does grab her, and Jennifer is able to sort of escape down sort of this hallway. And she finds a young boy who starts talking to her and stuff like that. So she's like, oh, it's okay now. The assumption being that Frau Buckner is the villain up to that point. And so we're like, okay, we're kind of at the ending point of the movie. It's the last couple minutes, and now the boy is saved, presumably because he had a really messed up mother. And then the boy turns around, and his face is just all screwed up, and he starts to attack Jennifer. That was another moment where I'm like, oh, shit. Similar to the pool moment, for me at least.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, on one hand, though, I thought that it's like, at first I didn't notice that the boy was attacking her, so I was just like, oh, wow, that's mean of her. Just like, oh, he's ugly. Fuck it. Yeah. I'm gonna run away.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those where they probably would handle that slightly differently. If they did it today, they'd probably give him some weapon or something. So she has more of a reason to run away than him just being ugly, which is, yeah, I agree. That's a little messed up, but yeah, it's 1985. What are you going to do?
I know.
But yeah, they I don't know. I mean, I like a lot of the gore effects and the practicals of this film. It's super goopy in this finale, and I think throughout, like the gore effects and stuff like that are pretty A+ throughout this film. So she runs over, and here's where it starts to get a little Friday the 13th, because she runs out to that boat, tries to get away. The boy chases her. The boy is actually wielding the weapon that we'd seen earlier in the film. And eventually, what happens exactly? He falls.
He pokes. So that's the moment where she uses her special powers.
Yes, that's right.
As he's trying to kill her, he pokes a gas line, or what's it called, the
oil or whatever.
The oil petrol, like the Brits would say, whatever. He pokes the tank, getting everything full of gasoline. And then a bunch of bees, I don't know, some swarm of animals are attacking him, fucking up his face even more. Good use of dummy on that. He falls on the water, and then she's like, okay, now I can go back, and tries to turn on the engine of the boat, and the boat blows up.
Yeah, and she has to jump into the water. So you said dummy. I did some research on this. For the final scene where Patel, who is the son, is swarmed with flies, over 2 million eggs were bought and incubated in an oven. As soon as they hatched, actor David Marotta, who plays the son, was put and is, I think, a dwarf. He was like 28. Was put into makeup and wardrobe, then rushed to set. To attract the newborn flies, his clothes and covered face were coated in glucose, and the flies were released from very fine nets to swarm his body. After completing the scene, the crew opened the studio windows to release all of the flies, but they inhabited the neighborhood businesses for weeks. So, Argento is a freaking psychopath, and a lot of that was done more realistically, I guess, in a way.
Yeah, I. What's funny though is that he still was wearing a mask.
Yeah.
It looks like it was a special. Like it looks like a different mask, different. Like when you first see the child's face, that looks like lots of makeup and props, right?
Mm-hmm.
When he's getting his face eaten, it looks more like a mask.
Yeah.
So that's why I thought it was a dummy.
It makes sense. It makes sense. I mean, like, if we were to do it, I mean, I think it'd probably be a dummy. I mean, it's pretty crazy what these people did, as well as like Candyman, which we already covered in the show. Just the amount of like practicals they do, but gotta respect it to some extent. So the boat blows up. One thing I like for the rest of the scenes too is that we're able to just see like this fire on the lake in the background for pretty much all the scenes, and it creates a really, really beautiful visual. I think Argento, as always, is just a great visual director in terms of like creating these very memorable, very pretty images. Then Jennifer needs to kind of swim underwater, so she does that, and we sort of have a moment similar to the underwater scene in Inferno, where I think Patel, the son, grabs at her leg or something like that, but she does eventually escape. Not exactly sure what happens to Patel. I assume he dies somewhere underwater. Okay.
No, he burns. So she because they both keep on having to go up to get some air, and when he goes up after he's kicked, he goes up right where the fire is, and then he burns.
I see. Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Thank you. And so she escapes, and finally, Scott Shapiro shows up. Took him a while, and it seems like she's going to embrace him at the end. But out of nowhere, here comes Frau Buckner again with some sort of a thing, and just cleanly decapitates him.
I know the head rolls like, and once again, one of those moments where you think everything is over, and you're like, wham.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of the ending of Deep Red in a way, where we have that elevator decapitation. And, Argento, no one does it quite like him, where he has these just very joyful killings that bring a smile to my face. And then, not to be outdone, the chimp comes to save the day and basically stabs Frau Buckner to death, and ends with an embrace of the chimp and Jennifer Connelly, which is a pretty wonderful ending.
Yeah. That's why I actually have it almost as high as the other ones.
No. I mean, you're not... I think I tend to rate this film slightly lower than other Argento enthusiasts who... most of them consider it in like his top 4 or 5. So I don't think... I think I might be slightly more... I mean, I enjoy the hell out of this conclusion. It's just a lot of like the unevenness before that I said. Any last thoughts on the conclusion?
Well, so I mean, one of the things that I really liked about the ending, or about this whole sequence that you were talking about, were the scenes underwater, where you have the fire on top, she's underwater fighting this
child,
little monster.
Yeah.
And I just really like Argento's underwater scenes. They're just the way that they light it and everything. And in this one, where you're having fire on top, I'm not sure, but I'm assuming for the fire they did some they played with the lights on top. I'm not sure.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I thought that was really nice. A very nice touch.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think they tossed a ton of money at this last bit, and Argento probably used all of the resources that he could come up with, and I think it works really well. I mean, I can see even for just this last scene alone, it's easy to see how this film can remain in sort of consciousness as like a cult classic at the bare minimum. Yeah. Okay, well, before we move on to our last questions of who won the movie and rating, any other things to add?
No, I think.
Okay. Any souvenir you would take from this film?
The poker.
The poker? Okay, so the weapon? That's a good one. I don't know. I hadn't thought about this. A lot of the best stuff is more organic in this film, so I don't know. I'm not going to take that pit of disgustingness. So yeah, I'll take the poker too. Okay. Who? Oh, one last thing about about Jennifer Connelly in this film is, let me see if I can pull this up. She said in an interview that she was bitten by the chimp in this film. Apparently, during one scene, the chimp kept turning around, and Dario Argento, not wanting to film her behind, asked Connelly to place her hand on the animal to stop her from churning. But when she attempted to do so, the chimp became enraged and bit her, and then became very hostile towards Connelly for the rest of the film. So the rumor is that Jennifer Connelly had part of her finger bitten off by the chimp in the final scene at the end of the film. She was rushed to the hospital, and the finger was reattached. So, not entirely smooth sailing with the chimp.
That's hilarious, because the scene, that if it's a final scene, that's the scene where they're embracing each other.
It is, yeah.
And you're like, oh,
yeah.
It's like real life. Right after the monkey just bit her finger off.
Yeah. It's like one of those SNL skits where they're like have like a cheesy commercial, and then it's like goes to the reality. It's like, my finger. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, goes to show that there is a cost sometimes to some of these films. Anyways, who won the movie? Can you give it to the chimp after that?
Yes, I still, yeah. 100. The chimp not only did a great job acting, it took a finger. The chimp took a souvenir.
Okay. If I were to be honest, I'd give it to the same person, but I'll give it to Donald Pleasance. I think he gives a really good performance in a role that, or in a film that really lacks good dialogue and good writing, and so I think that really helps to carry the film. And him and the chimp just have really good chemistry. Yeah. Okay, and now to rating.
I'll give it an 8.
Okay. I think you kind of talked me up on this film a little bit. I was kind of at a 7.5. I think I'll go with the higher rating, the 7.5 here. Honestly, I could respect anything from 6 to 8 for this film. It's a lot of fun, but there are some moments that are just like pretty bad, just dramatically speaking and stuff like that. So it's a really tricky one for me to rate. Probably one that I would be perfectly willing to rewatch just on the basis of like that totally bonkers last 25 minutes that I think is pretty awesome. Okay.
Can you imagine if Creepers, they cut off all the chimp scenes?
Oh God, that'd be terrible. I mean,
but I was thinking, I mean, if I was Jennifer Connelly, I would be extra pissed because she basically lost a finger. Well, not, I guess we got reattached, but she almost lost a finger, and nothing is there to show for it.
I mean, that's one perspective, or the other perspective would be, fuck that chimp, I don't want to ever see it again.
True, but I mean, isn't it frustrating that you had to deal with, and it's hypothetical, of course, you had the whole film, you dealt with this chimp, and then the chimp wasn't even used at the end, the final cut.
Yeah.
So it's like, why did I lose? Why did I even go through this?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it just didn't work out, Yeah. But yeah, true. Fair points all around. Thankfully, the chimp scenes are some of the best in the film, so it works really well. And, honestly, oddly enough, I think this might be like the most emotional Argento film, just because it has a really kind of moving finale, despite what may have happened behind the scenes.
Yeah, I was curious. Because before watching this film, you had told me that you didn't want to spoil the why, but you had told me that Jennifer Connelly did not want to ever think about this film. And I was like, I watched it and I'm like, huh, it's nothing that she was required to do in this film. Because, like, from what you can see, given that, like in Requiem, her character had to do very degrading stuff.
Oh, God, yeah.
So I was just like, okay. Because, I was thinking Italian film, women, maybe she had to do something degrading. It's like, no, there's nothing degrading here. And now it's like, oh, okay, she almost lost a finger.
Yeah,
Got
yeah.
it.
Has to do more with behind the scenes stuff, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I could also see an actor too. I mean, Argento films, you almost have to appreciate this in a certain part of your brain. If you look at this and you're like looking for good acting and stuff like that, you're probably not going to enjoy this film because like it lacks a lot of that stuff, but it brings it back in other aspects that I think are highly enjoyable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that concludes this episode of Film to Film. Thank you all for tuning in. You can send us an email at zafilmtofilm@gmail.com or send us a tweet at zafilmtofilm. And we will see y'all in a couple weeks. Ciao.
Ciao.